In this session, we are going to do classwork 3 together, and like a regular class session, we are going to discuss and elaborate on everything. The structure is in this way. It is broken down into 7 activities. And just a heads up, the video continues and is recorded continuously. So you control the pace of learning. In that way, for example, a challenge is discussed, just pause the video at that point and put thinking, contemplation, or anything else on that part before you check the answer and discussion with this video. Classwork is in the field of finance, and it is again a financial case. And since we discussed another financial case, but it was financial planning, you should be now more familiar with this field when it comes to mathematical modeling. Okay, let's review the challenge together. Wealth Mutual Fund Incorporated, located in New York City. And remember the points that we talked about before about how to get rid of superficial difficulty of cases we have regarding financial modeling. Always they apply for new cases. For example, here it says Wealth Mutual Fund Incorporated, located in New York City. It should have nothing to tell us. It should have nothing to help us for financial case that we are trying to handle. So very easily I can, you see, get rid of them. I know there is a company. There is a company. Wealth just obtained $100,000 by converting industrial bonds to cash and is now looking for other investment opportunities for these funds. So we get an idea what the mathematical model is trying to tell us. They just got $100,000 and they want to invest it in some other things. In the previous financial planning case that we had last week, it was again assignment of money to investment opportunities. It is exactly the same thing, just the literature is different, terminology is different, and I just want to challenge you in a new way. So they have this $100,000 for that investment. Okay, based on Wealth's current investment, the firm's top financial analyst recommends that all new investment be made in the oil industry, steel industry, or in government bonds. Okay, they are important information. So we have here oil industry, we have steel industry, and government bonds. So according to these things, we predict that we have 3 fields for investment. For the previous case that we had, the different cases there were available for investment were bond type 1, bond type 2, bond type 3, and saving account at the beginning of year 1, saving account at the beginning of year 2, saving account at the beginning of year 3, and so forth. But here it seems the problem is smaller. Specifically, the analyst identified 5 investment opportunities and projected their annual rate of return. So not only it says let's go and invest in oil industry, also they have specified specific companies in oil industry, specific companies in a steel industry. And so we come up with 5 options. You quickly, if you are caught up with everything we discussed in this course, should get the idea what the decision variable is gonna be. The investment and rate of returns are shown in the table on the right. For example, here it says Atlantic Oil rate of return annually is 7.3%, Pacific Oil is 10.3%, Midwest Steel 6.4%, and Hoover Steel 7.5%, and government bonds 4.5%. You may quickly say, okay, let's go and invest all the money in the Pacific Oil because it has the maximum return, that is 10.3%, but it's not going to be the case. And the main reason for that is if they are going to invest all the money in one company, the investment would be very risky. So that's the reason diversification of the portfolio is always the case. So they are going to put some money in Pacific Oil, Atlantic Oil, Midwest Steel, Hoover Steel, and government bonds just to control it. So there should be some more constraint on the explanation of the problem on the next page in a way that try to control the risk, because they are going to give you all this information to you as a mathematical modeler, as the decision scientist, and you just get the data and you model it, solve it, and give them back the results. So let's go to the next page that talks about some more points. Management of wealth impose the following investment guidelines for you as decision scientists. Neither industry, oil or steel, should receive more than $50,000. You see, they are trying to control risk. They don't want to put all their money or most of their money in oil or nor steel. They want it distributed. So anything happens to oil, they would have steel. Anything happens to steel industry, they have oil. Anything happens to the economy, for example, to stock exchange, and these companies went under bad situation, they have government bonds, so they can cover some sort of hedging. Government bonds should be at least 25% of the steel industry investment. And we are going to discuss them more in detail, and I'm going to give you time. In fact, you are going to give yourself time by pausing the video. The investment in Pacific Oil, the high return but high risk investment, exactly the one that I told you. You see, Pacific Oil is 10.3%, and it has the highest return, but it is risky. So since it is risky, it cannot be more than 60% of the total oil industry investment. So on one hand, they control the investment in oil, and on the other hand, they control investment in Pacific Oil. Build a mathematical model to maximize the projected return. So my friends, with all the things that we discussed together, because of the experiences you got so far, you should have an idea of decision variables. Just generally, what are the decision variables? What is the objective function? And remember, it is explicitly talking about the objective function. It says build the mathematical model to maximize the projected return. So we now have the definition of the objective function. And also about the constraints, you are going to see some points here. For example, it says that about this bullet, this bullet, this bullet, and also there is something here, and it says the total amount of money that we have is $100,000. You see, my friends, when you are doing more practice regarding mathematical modeling, how much you are quicker in getting the points. Okay, let's go for this activity 1, and it is asking you, what are the decision variables? Pause the video now and go and review the case and patiently write the decision variables down and elaborate on them according to the rules that we discussed. About the decision variables here, I can tell you this case is easier than the financial planning case that we did before. In the financial planning case, you had different type of opportunities. For example, when you wanted to invest in bonds, it was about the number of bonds, but when you wanted to invest in the saving account, it was amount of money or dollars invested in the saving account. Also, we convert them in case, so it was quite a case. So when we check our description here, and when we see these 5 opportunities that we have, that you can see here, we come up with this idea that the decision variables are these: how much money to invest in Atlantic Oil, how much money to invest in Pacific Oil, how much money to invest in Midwest Steel, Hoover Steel, and government bonds. Because you want the decision scientist tells you about this, and you want them to tell you about the amount or about the dollars you invest in Atlantic Oil, Pacific Oil, and all those things. So we can see the decision variables here that, okay, again, as you can see, the notation doesn't make any difference. If any of you has made the notation as x1, x2, x3, x5, and x6, it's completely correct. And that's the reason I always say that elaboration is very important. It must be thorough and detailed. So you see, when it says about A, it is Atlantic Oil. So that's the reason they used A. Or when you see it is P, it is Pacific Oil. And M, Midwest Steel, as you can see, it is the notation. Notations is not important, but the elaboration on the decision variables is very important, my friends. So now we have our decision variables, as you can see in this slide. After we got our decision variables defined, the mathematical modeling goes on a downhill in terms of difficulty. It becomes easier and easier because when you have the decision variables, it's very easy to decide about the other parts. Okay, here it's asked us about the objective function. So again, pause the video and go and review the case and try to figure out what is the objective function. When we check the video, even in case we didn't have this explicit reference to the objective function, you should have noticed that they have some money and there are some investment opportunities with a specific rate of return. So they want to maximize the benefit they got, the return on their investment. So as you can see here, it says build the mathematical modeling to maximize the projected return. So you have a maximizing case. Pause it and write it down.